So I'm Claire. I'm a junior this year, finishing up my junior year. I was the small fellow in museum studies, and I did my fellowship at the African American Museum of Iowa in Cedar Rapids. It's on 12th Street next to the river and across from the Czech and Slovak Museum. So this is a picture of us, obviously, and this is another intern from when I was there. Nope, wrong button. So a little bit about the African American Museum. This is their mission statement pulled directly from their website. And it is to preserve, publicize, and educate the public on the African American heritage and culture of Iowa. It is considered a small museum. It has 2 gallery spaces, one with their permanent exhibit, talking about the experience of African Americans from Africa all the way into President Obama's election. And then the other gallery is their technically temporary, but the exhibit up there stays for a year. So what I did while I was there was researched photos and people for the Only One temporary exhibit. The Only One exhibit is looking at the experiences of African American Iowans as 3% or less of the population in Iowa. So we would have hundreds and hundreds of photos where you would have only one African American in the photograph. And so we wanted to know a bit more about these people, about their experiences, about things that would have shaped perceptions of them as well. And so I was doing research on the photographs, I was doing research on the people, possibly other surrounding contexts for that, as well, to possibly get an idea of what it was like to be the only African American in a variety of situations in Iowa. Other things I was requested to do was I was working on the traveling exhibit panels. This is an example of the new traveling exhibit that most of them will be completed pretty soon. So I reworked the text for those. I didn't actually work on this one, but that's just an example. And some of the ones I have worked on are actually at the museum now, and I got to see one of the first ones I worked on, and they're really neat. I'm really excited about them. And then other things I did was compile lists of possible collection items and archival materials to use in the Only One exhibit. This is me in the archives loft with boxes and boxes of old paper. As well as to write descriptive labels for some of the items that we were thinking about using, as well as the larger panel texts for the actual exhibit itself. And those are all hanging up in the the Gail Sayers temporary gallery now. So you can go to the museum and see those. Additional tasks I got to do while I was there is I got to clean flood damaged items. Some of you may not know, in 2008 there was a flood in Cedar Rapids, many parts of Iowa. And the museum was, right next to the river, it was pretty heavily impacted by that flood. The exhibits that were there were completely destroyed. And the expectation was there would only be 5 feet of water. The museum got 5 feet 3 inches or something like that. And so many of the items were damaged. So I got to, as those were coming back, clean them a little bit, get my little brush right there and my gloves, and clean off some of those things. I also was able to process letters that accompanied a donation of Liberian pottery from a couple in Mount Vernon. I assisted with the Only One community panel meetings as I was coming up with these lists of items and objects. So I got to kind of present those to the community panel. Return processed archival materials to boxes as part of the digitization project. They would be out, and so I got to put them back in their boxes up in that loft I showed you earlier. And then I also, through a kind of a chance happening, I got to help conduct the oral history interviews for part of this exhibit. And so here, these are 3 of the people I got to interview. This is former Mayor of Clinton, Lametta Wynn. And this is Dr. Majetta Thornton Dungy and her husband, Dr. Claiborne Dungy. As you see here, Dr. Majetta Thornton Dungy is class of '64 from Cornell. She was the first African-American woman to graduate from Cornell. And so it was an extremely moving experience for me to hear what things were like in the early '60s at Cornell and how she experienced, a little bit of discrimination, a little bit of, she didn't have the same kind of opportunities as I had when she was here between '61 and '64. So it was interesting for me to hear her stories from back then and kind of compare to what it is now, and see all these new opportunities like the writing center. She didn't have anyone to look over her papers, and I do, and anyway, that was very moving for me. So what I learned through this museum experience, how to apply the basic research skills, and every Cornell student will testify that there's at least 4 classes a year where your professor will take you into the library and say, this is how we do a research paper. This is how you come up with search terms. And so being at the museum, I got to apply that outside. There was no one there to hold my hand and say, here's how you come up with search terms, but I got to apply that as we learned for 4 blocks every year. I also learned basic archival techniques, conservation skills, collection management, as well as the software that goes along with that. And I kind of got my feet wet with pretty much all of those things through the museum. Because it's a smaller museum, sometimes there's a large amount of things to do, and maybe not always people to do them. So I got to kind of try out many, many things. I learned about label writing, the value of the community panel, and it takes a village to raise an exhibit. I will say that, everybody went over the text, everybody went over from Michelle in education to Grant in development to Ben in development to Tom who's the director. Everybody got to go over the text, everybody got to go over the images and kind of have their input in addition to the community panel. And so seeing the effort that goes into making this exhibit, which is now hanging and is beautiful and a wonderful success, that was really neat for me. And so the impact of this, I got to see history in action. A lot of times we think of history as dead. Clearly through this museum, it's not dead. It is an active thing. We are constantly discovering new things, and we want to talk to everyone about them. And this experience narrowed my focus specifically to museum studies, and specifically to the archives and collection kind of area of museum studies. I would not have been able to have this experience without the fellowship and the generosity of my donors and the structure in place. I would not have had this experience otherwise, and I'm truly, truly grateful because it's enabled me to qualify for future internships and work study positions. So this summer I will be going to New York for another archives internship with a different institution, and I feel like my experience at the museum has come in so invaluable to me in gaining that position, as well as next year I will also be working the Cornell archives with Mary Iber. Yeah, she's in the back there. I will be working with her at the Cornell archives, and we've already started talking about projects for next year, and I'm just really excited about that too. And so I would like to thank Richard and Norma Small. They are my donors. I had a chance to meet them, and they are just wonderful, lovely people, and their generosity has really made this a truly amazing opportunity for me. Lynn Coos, who's here, the curator and my site advisor at the African American Museum, as well as Catherine Stewart, my faculty sponsor and academic advisor, for her encouragement and support throughout this whole process and as many processes as I decide to go on. Yes, so thank you.